Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Prof. De Leon. How are you today?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Sheila.
So today is an interesting afternoon because we're going to talk about something that I think uh, many Filipinos would like to hear out because it's something that we all experience. It's something that we all know to be true. But finally, we're talking about this sensible issue and our power to heal. So take it away, Prof. Ano po yung topic natin ngayon?
Well, actually, the categories that I'll talk about are universal when it comes to the healing quality that they have. Although I think Filipino culture is very rich in these qualities, cultural traits that have to do with healing. And I call this healing philosophy of the Filipinos, Hiyang. Yes. And of course, I'll explain as we go along what Hiyang is. But I was saying earlier, the prescriptions for healing and health or health and happiness are universal and found in other cultures. But the Philippines is quite lucky to have all of them in great quantity. No, in terms of practices, we have a lot of practices that help promote that kind of healing philosophy, which I call Hiyang.
When did you start studying about this, Prof? And what got you drawn to this concept, to this aspect of our culture?
Oh, from the very beginning, at least actually, uh, you were not born yet. Since the 60s, I've been interested in studying Philippine culture. Since 1960, actually, I started becoming interested in Philippine culture, its history, arts, philosophy, and later I realized that Philippine culture is very rich in healing traditions. I became very interested in this aspect of Philippine culture. That's why I even joined some organizations like Pambansang Samahan sa Psikolohiyang Filipino or National Association for Philippine Psychology to understand Philippine culture better. And I became the president of in 1984, I became the president of the Philippine Association for the Study of Traditional Asian Medicine. I'm not a doctor, but as a cultural researcher, I found that healing can have many, many cultural aspects, and that healing is not just biomedical, but also socio-cultural, psycho-spiritual. That's why medicine, of course, is a great force for healing, but that's not enough. In fact, our lifestyle also determines a lot whether we will be healthy, live to ripe old age, or um, deteriorate early, simply because we're not following a healthy lifestyle. So I have become interested in healthy lifestyles. And actually, when I was the chairman of the Department of Humanities in UP, and from 1978, 1972 to 1986, I instituted a course for the first time. We had an AB Humanities pre-med, AB Humanities leading to medicine. That was a preparatory degree for medicine, where I combined arts and sciences, biology, zoology, and many other scientific disciplines, together with the humanities to produce a balanced medical practitioner. So UP was one of the very first in the world to institute an AB Humanities pre-med course. We were ahead of many American universities and European universities in instituting this course on AB Humanities pre-med. And we have many graduates of this AB Humanities pre-med, and many of them became the assistants of Dr. Flavier, and many of them became the leaders in holistic medicine.
Wow.
That's the background, yes.
Okay. What would you say, Prof? Is the common denominator among those who have decoded the the formula?
Okay. Well, it's not really a formula because it depends on how people apply it, and it depends on the mindset, on the personalities that will apply this. But this is, I can say, it's a recipe. recipe rather than a formula, because you really have to do it on your own, beginning with the recognition of the many, many forces that influence our health. But definitely, it has to do with an expansion of being. You must not be an isolated being, because almost all the diseases are caused by feeling isolated, that you are alone. Uh, Especially when you are so full of ego. Ego means separateness. People have so much ego. People have so much ego. Um, do not feel connected. Do not feel connected to the world, and because of this, they suffer from anxiety. There's always some kind of anxiety, tension, stress when a person is not connected, not connected to the world. Connected means many things. Connected to other people, connected to nature, connected to your soul, connected to other beings, connected to the collective unconscious. And these connections are multi-level connections. It's not just one kind of connection. So that's what I'm trying to explain to the Filipino culture of healing, which is really multi-dimensional, uh, multimodal, and really holistic. That's why I think if we're going to promote Filipino culture, this is really uh, something that you can contribute to the world, because it's about health, it's about healing, and we are very strong in this aspect of life. Together with that, communication. Filipinos are very good in healing. Our culture is really a culture of healing. At the same time, we are very good in communication languages. So that's why we should be the center of communication. We are number one. Actually, we are number one in social media. Although it might be sound trivial, but even in the internet, we are number one in Facebook, selfie, selfie capital of the world, because we love to connect to people. So these are among the Filipino strengths. And we are also superior in art, because we are people who would like to express ourselves. Why? Because expression is one of the best ways to connect. That's why in the Philippines, the most popular types of art are the performing arts, not so much visual arts, literature, and architecture, simply because they cannot connect you to people as much as the performing arts. And this is the reason why we are really superior in the performing arts, especially music. So you might like, I have a PowerPoint here that I can use in order to explain, just in case you like to ask some more questions. Yes.
The social aspect
Uh,
of healing, Prof, is really about connection. No?
yes, of course. But it's not just a simple connection of knowing people, knowing their names or being acquainted with them. It's really a close relationship, because you really will feel so stressed when you are not connected, when you are not close to anybody. You know? It's not the quantity of relationships or acquaintances. In other words, when you have many friends in social media, that doesn't mean anything, because that's not enough. You have to have close relationship. It's the quality of relationship that matters. The quality,
Yeah.
and it also has to do with how this relationship will protect your brain, simply because it is a satisfying relationship. It gives you a superior kind of relaxation, because when you have somebody to lean on, it makes you feel more relaxed. And relaxation is one of the keys to healing. That's one of the, well, I'll mention later, 5 keys to healing, and relaxation is one of the most important. You have to remove the stress that comes from being isolated, and somebody close to you, especially one who can really listen, no, to your problems, listen to your stories, one who can really love you unconditionally. That's very, very important. It's not the number of people, maybe around 5 will be good enough. You don't have to befriend everybody. That's impossible, and it's not I don't recommend it. Just have 2, 3, at most 5 very close friends. That will be enough to
So
sustain you.
quality relations, Prof. No wonder even
Exactly.
with the number of friends that we have online, no, instead of because of the number of friends that we have online, instead of the relationship becoming energizing, it becomes they become enervating.
Sometimes it becomes debilitating simply because you cannot even establish a meaningful relationship with any one of them. You just know well, their likes and dislikes, and you cannot get into the hearts of these people. You cannot even empathize with them because you only see symbols, images that have nothing to do with a face-to-face relationship, because there's nothing like a face-to-face relationship to establish a close relationship. That's why it's really important to really select your friends.
That
You
aspect
select
on
it.
empathy, Prof. Why do you think it's something that is compromised when we're not particular about the quality of relations that we have?
You're asking about how we can develop empathy.
Yes, because it seems like it's easy to
There are many ways, of course.
as it becomes challenging, right? Like with the many associations that a person has, instead of closely connecting, where our tendency is to disassociate. So to me, I think that's so powerful. Yung parang yung power to empathize that has to be given much focus nowadays, especially since many things that we're dealing with and people that we're corresponding with can lead us to being numb or
Uh,
being
you have to know the person fully before you can empathize. You have to know the personality. You have to know the family life. You have to know so much about the person. I think one of the best ways to know about a person is to know the stories. You have to know the story of the person from earliest time until now. That's why sharing stories is one of the best ways, one of the best ways to develop empathy, because you will know what drives the person, the problems of the person, what makes him well uh, move, no? What drives him to do things that this person does, and what are his aspirations in life, hopes and dreams, fears, and why, and so on. Especially when it comes to knowing the fears. What are the fears of this person? Because that's one of the best ways to understand what makes the person tick. So it's really the storytelling. One of the best ways to develop empathy is through storytelling. And this is where literature comes in. Literature is one of the most important for a person to develop empathy. Even if you even if you don't fit persons right away, the moment you begin to read the great novels, uh, or listen to beautiful music, and look at the different works of art, you begin to understand human nature. You begin to understand what makes persons hope for something or become desperate, become depressed. And you will understand human psychology much more when you read novels, literature, because they penetrate into human feelings much more than sociology or psychology dissertations.
would you say, Prof, that the ability to empathize is something inherent? Are there people who are simply not capable of empathizing? And if so, is that a defect?
Um, there are some people who have a natural capacity to empathize, but it has to be trained. It can be trained. One reason why Filipino culture is very rich in pakikiramdam or empathy, empathy is pakikiramdam, no? Is our child rearing practices. From the very young age, the baby sleeps beside the parent, beside the mother, or in between mother and father. This is very important. Uh, in fact, I usually interview my students, and I realized that well, these are sophomore, juniors, and even fourth-year students. I learned that at least in UP, where I have been teaching for a long, long time, the average age when a daughter or son uh, is given a separate bed or would like to sleep in another room, is 12 years old. That means until 12 years old, the Filipino children sleep beside their parents. And that's really a very, very good chance to develop a kind of emotional bonding with somebody. Very good training in feeling the other person's feelings. No, this is really one of the best trainings in empathy that we have. And you don't find that in other cultures because in Australian, American, German, and other Western cultures, Canadian cultures, the baby is usually given a separate crib or even a separate room. And according to many psychologists, the profile of serial killers is that they were never able to develop any kind of emotional bonding with anybody since they were children because they were given separate rooms. They were trained to be so independent. You know that in Denmark, at the age of 10, in Denmark, at the age of 10, they start winning their children away from their parents, to live separately from their parents, so that by the time they're 18, it's an obligation for them to live separately from their parents, starting at the age of 10. While in the Philippines, you may already be 30 years old, but your parents still do not want you to live separately from them. Of course, our carried to the extreme, our culture creates dependency, no? Carried to the extreme. But American culture carried to the extreme may produce serial killers simply because they become dry emotionally. So no culture is defective unless you carry that trait to the extreme. So all cultures are weak when you carry any trait to the extreme that becomes negative. That happens.
So
And
it's
there are many other aspects of our culture. If you really look at Filipino languages, they will create empathy. The moment you speak Filipino, or if you want to speak Tagalog, Ilocano, Visayan, or any Philippine language, because all of our Philippine language belong to only one family. They all came from Taiwan, which is Taiwan was a Southeast Asian country. It was not Chinese. It only became Chinese when the mainland became communist, and those who didn't want to become communist migrated to Taiwan. But Taiwan was really a Southeast Asian country. All of our languages came from Taiwan. And so all of our languages belong to one family. And the, our languages are so different, exact opposite of English, because you don't find in English um, collective verbs. I have not found any verb in English that is collective. Let's say, mag-unahan tayo, magsikain kayo, magsipaghanda. All of this refer to a collectivity. That means our languages encourage us to be together and work together and feel one another. That's why we have bayanihan, which is very, very common in this country. You know that all of our languages have a word for bayanihan,
I
and they
really
have all of our languages have a separate word for bayanihan, and they differ in some aspect, but they more or less refer to community self-help. And our verbs have so many collective verbs that refer to mutual reciprocal action by a collectivity. Kasing tigas, kasing ganda. When you pag sinabing kasing tigas, kasing ganda, you're completely equal. When kasing ganda, magkasing pangit, no one is more pangit than the other. This is language. And look, when you say in English, I did it, where is the emphasis? It's on the self. So you tend to separate yourself from other because you develop an ego of one who is doing it. No, you become an agent of action, and you separate yourself from the action because the focus is on the agent of action. I did it. Compare that to compare that to any Philippine language. Ginawa ko ito. You focus on the action, not on the agent of action. And this has a very, very big influence on the way we connect to other people, the way how close we feel one another. And the effect on this, look at our great athletes, sports men like even Pacquiao, no? Well, they changed a leader because when he became senator, but typically our boxers, even Efren Bata Reyes, was one of the champion of billiards in the world. Whenever they win, what do they say? I'm just lucky. I'm just lucky. Plus Elorde, whenever he won a boxing match, he said, I'm just lucky. When Manny Pacquiao won against Rick Hatton, he said, I'm just lucky. You don't find that in the American boxers. Mayweather he was claiming he was even better than Muhammad Ali. And whenever he enters the ring, he says, I'm the greatest. I'll knock you out in one round, and so on. You will never hear that from any Filipino boxer because we are trained to become one with others. In others, we are trained to become one of the group. No, there's so much sense of equality. The sense of equality is very, very deeply ingrained in Filipino culture. That's one of the non-negotiables in Philippine culture. The sense of that we are all children of God, so we are all equal. Nobody should be higher than the other. One who
But
has power has only power is privilege. It's not a right. Power cannot be a right, or even wealth cannot be a right. It's a privilege, and that's why you don't have to flaunt it. Yes, that's why
one
I
of
said
my
it.
favorite lessons from you, Prof, had to do with semiotics, languages. Do you think
Ah,
this have a very strong effect on culture? What's uh, what's the significance
of language.
of language, semiotics on culture?
Oh, language is not just for information or communication. It's really a philosophy. It's really a system of values. The moment you speak one language, you will have one mind. It's a kind of mindset. And then if you speak another language, you will have another mindset. That's why I think it's always very good to speak at least four different languages, because at least you will have four minds. You'll have four intelligences. Every language is a kind of intelligence. It gives you some kind of adequation, or adequation is an organ of perception. One language will give you an organ of perception for experiencing so many things in the world that you would not experience with another language. So every language is really a tool of perception. That's why I think it's a must that everybody should speak at least 3 to 4 very different languages, so that you will have four mindsets, and you will be more intelligent, definitely, and you'll be more humble because you
Uh,
begin to understand.
Curious question, Prof. Kasi we have really over 100 languages in our culture, and and uh, if we're going to talk about the one that's most powerful in influencing our culture, syempre ito yung Tagalog or Filipino.
But I'm not worried about the differences in language because I was saying earlier that even if you have, according to the count of Commission ng Wikang Filipino, even if you have 131 languages officially counted, no, all of them belong to one family.
Mm.
They share the same system of verbs, uh, collective verbs, no? And all of them do not begin with the subject. They begin with the predicate, and the subject comes after the predicate. So uh, for all practical purposes, it's actually on one language family, and they're so related to one another, especially if you look at the terminal syllable. The terminal syllable of ONG, for example, ong, means enclosure. In any Philippine language, the moment you find an ong as the terminal syllable, most likely it will refer to some kind of enclosure. Payong, kulong, patibong, silong, tumbong, and kabaong, and so on. These are all ong, or another terminal syllable, aw. The moment you find aw, that means wild, loose, and free in any Philippine language. I was in Batanes one time. I asked them, what is the meaning of this word ending in aw? Well, that's the same meaning as the words ending in aw in Ilonggo or in Tagalog. Let's say singaw, uh, alingaw is echo, uh, bugaw, bangaw, adusaw, sigaw, or araw. These are all the wild, loose, and free, or things that spread far and wide. Tao, to look in Ilonggo. So you can see that. Well, I can give many more examples of this, but our language actually, if I'm saying that you have to learn 4 languages, I'm not referring to when you know one Philippine language, you don't have to study right away another Philippine language because they are the same. More or less, they have the same worldview. So when I say study at least 4 languages, you study Tagalog or Ilocano or Bisaya, and then English, because English is a very opposite that of Tagalog. And then after that, maybe uh, Spanish or French, because again, English and French are so different. Or maybe something really different, Russian or Chinese or Arabic. The more different they are, the better. I'll quote from Wolfgang Goethe, who said that uh, you cannot really understand the human mind. You do not really understand the workings of the human mind unless you speak 4 different languages. Because the whole range of the human mind is so wide, so vast, that you'll only understand the workings of the human mind if you know at least 4 very different languages, the way they think. The way you think in French, there is an African language where the moment you speak, you have to indicate where you are in terms of the 4 cardinal points. You have to indicate where you are in terms of north, south, east, west. Otherwise, you can't even speak at all. When you're going somewhere, you have to indicate where you are in terms of these 4 cardinal points. That's one African language.
So we're,
You can see how different.
by the way, we are still talking about, for those who are viewing, the first category of the culture of healing with social, no? First pa lang
Well,
yan.
social is only one of the first one. Well, only one category. There are 4 categories.
So,
4 categories.
second, Prof.
Second is the creative aesthetic.
Ano,
But yes, um, the social is really so vast that there are many things that you can say about it. If you relate to exhaust that category, your whole this whole 1.5 hours will just be devoted to that. But the second one is the creative aesthetic. When you create, you become one with your, well, for lack of a better term, soul. No, soul is a term that we use for your gift. Maybe you can use gift. Every person has a gift. No person is without this. You really have to find your gift. According to Pablo Picasso, one of the greatest painters of Spain, finding your gift is the meaning of your life. Sharing that gift with others is the purpose of your life. Your gift really connects you to a larger world because your gift is not of the ego. The ego is the separate self. When you feel separate from others, that's the ego. That's why you feel insecure. The moment you connect to your soul, you're no longer of the ego. Because I'll give you the example of the iceberg. Actually, our being can be compared to an iceberg. The ego is the tip of the iceberg. When you limit your being to the ego, you are disconnecting yourself from the bigger part of the iceberg, from what is submerged. And that means you will be so afraid, so fearful, you'll be alone, you'll feel isolated. But connect to the larger part of your being. Actually, that's part of your being. It's in the so-called in the collective unconscious, but even deeper than the collective unconscious, it is source of your creativity. Because according to Filipino philosophy, each one of us is a ray of God. That's the concept of kapwa, which is a widespread in Philippine culture. The concept of kapwa. Each one of us is a ray of God. And uh, being a ray of God, we have the creativity, we have the creative spirit of the creator. Being children of God, we are co-creators. We are co-creators with God. And the moment you connect to that part of you, which is your soul, uh, according to according to the psychologist Dr. Susana Reyes, who studied Philippine psychology extensively, the ray is composed of what? That the farthest from the sun, from, let's say, if we compare the infinite creator to an infinite sun, at the center of the sun is the creator. You might call it God, no, or the creative living principle in the universe. Now, each ray is composed of this, no. At the end of the ray is your physical body. Then after that is your ulirat or malay tao, your awareness, no, you being aware. And then after that is your buddhi or conscience, and after that is your soul called called bait in ancient Tagalog. That soul is nearest to the sun, to the center of the sun, and that's where you connect. If you don't get away from the conscious mind, which is basically your physical awareness, that which is at the tip, at the end of the ray, then you are disconnecting from your soul. And that soul is where you find your creativity. The moment you connect to your soul, you become bigger, you become bigger. Now, imagine that a ray, no? As I said, the end of the ray is the physical body, and your your conscious mind is limited to that part of your being. The moment you connect to your ray, you become more self-aware, you become connected to your feelings, and then later you become connected to your conscience, buddhi, and then you finally get connected to your soul. That means you have become a much, much bigger person. You
So
now you are now connected to the iceberg. And no, the moment you connect to your iceberg, I'm sure many of you have experienced it. The moment you are in what you call that very creative state, you'll feel a sense of uh, timelessness, as if you are not in this world. You feel so inspired. You feel so powerful. You feel so powerful. Though, if you are in the midst of what we call creative energy, if you are in the midst of creative energy, it will be very easy for you to write a novel, to compose music, to paint. No, I'm sure some of you have experienced some kind of peak experience where you feel that you are not bound by time, and your being has become so big that you are very easy for you to create a poem or do something creative. This is how you, this is how what you experience when you are now one with your soul. You are now in the midst of the
you
peak of creativity.
I I would like to ask kasi yung parang yung concept that you're talking about and you have mentioned this in your lectures that every person is an extension of God.
Yes,
And then,
yes. That's the Filipino philosophy.
oh,
That's a
about,
Filipino philosophy.
what about those artists, creative people who are atheists? Hindi sila naniniwala that there's a God.
Ah, but I can still connect to their unconscious without their realizing it. They're actually connecting to God without their realizing it the moment they create. Because the moment you create, you enter what Maslow calls peak experience. When you're in the peak experience, everything seems so light. You experience an accelerating kind of joy that you can explain, and the task seems so easy. You can write. Look, Handel wrote a 3-hour oratorio in 15 days. In 2 weeks, you do not finish something like an opera completed voicing and orchestration in 2 weeks. He did that because he was working so rapidly. And Nicanor Abelardo, whenever music was needed for some kind of function, he could compose one whole kundiman in 4 minutes. My father finished Pasko na naman, that very popular Christmas carol. He finished it in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And it's a very popular song. And the other song that he finished is another Christmas carol, Noche Buena. He did that in 7 minutes. That's when you're in the peak of creative experience because you're one with your soul.
Is your is your father's creativity a strong influence on you, Prof? Or would you say that your creativity is something inherent that you got drawn to it, and you will be drawn to it even without the presence of your father?
Actually, it's different in my case. I never, because my parents never taught us music, never bothered about our being creative. In fact, they forbade us from studying music because he said, then my father said that if you finish music, what will happen to you? You might have no job at all because unless you're the best in music, you will not earn money. Better take another course where you can easily earn money and just think of music later. So I just took music on my own. without my father knowing it. And I studied art, and on my own, I discovered creativity through my intellectual curiosity. In other words, I don't think creativity came to me naturally. I studied very much the psychology of creativity and tried to put myself in the right condition and did the kind of practice that would bring me to that peak experience. In other words, I trained myself to be creative.
Mhm.
It did not come naturally. Well, maybe I have something natural to a certain extent, but it's really helped by my studies of the humanities, especially. I studied
Aside,
the works of the greatest artists.
yeah. Aside note, Prof, curious lang ako kasi I've always known that your father, the late Felipe de Leon, is a national artist for
Yes.
music. And yung mga kinakanta pala naming pamasko, marami doon sinulat niya. So
Ay,
for our,
sa Buena and Payapang Daigdig. Yun na Payapang Daigdig?
of course, tinuro niyo sa amin yan nung nag-choir ako.
Oo.
That has become my favorite Christmas songs.
You
Yeah.
can, another, this is the second, no? Well, second category. Anybody, speaking to Edwin, so Godwin and Andrew, anybody can be creative. Why? Because Edison was correct to a certain extent, although he was exaggerating, uh, but to a certain extent what he was saying, the substance. He said that genius is 99% perspiration and only 1% inspiration. That's true in some ways. Why? Because this is the best analogy I have found. I got it from Abe. Maybe he was a friar or a priest. I don't know. He wrote a book on creative thinking. But Abe Dimney, Ernest Dimney, said or likened creativity to a dirty, like water running along a dirty canal.
Mhm.
A dirty canal. Think of a dirty canal, and uh, that dirty canal has been dry for a long, long time. No, there has been no water running on that dirty canal for a long, long time. So all the debris, all the dirt is there. But then you start uh, what, opening a faucet or opening a water source, and the water starts flowing with debris, and through time, debris start being washed away by the water. Later, and then the canal becomes cleaner and cleaner until later it's pure water that is flowing to the canal, and that's the nature of creativity.
And that's for any form of creativity, Prof.
For any form of creativity, not just scientific, philosophical, religious, spiritual, any kind of creativity. Which means what
How,
what what does the water flowing to the canal mean? It means you work hard. You train yourself, write and write and write and write, or whatever you are creating, start working on it. Just work and work and work. In the beginning, it will be there will be nothing. No good ideas may come out. Just persist because the canal is not yet clean. And as you work more and more, you train, and according to Edison, perspiration, you perspire more. You really have to work hard, no? And start studying whatever your models are, the great music, great composition, great literary compositions, and so on.
so,
Just write and write, create and create until the water becomes clear. And later you will find that you will have so many ideas, and you may not even be able to stop the ideas coming out from your mind. That's
this is
how
a
you train.
fresh view, Prof, if I may interrupt. Para dun sa mga nagsasabi, I'm not creative, I don't have,
That's not true. That's not true.
because
Because
everything is focused on.
yeah, because everybody is a child of God, and you are naturally creative, and you just have to exert effort because it's really so much effort before you can clean the canal, because you will only be creative, exuberant with ideas when the canal is now with pure water running on it. That what means you have cleaned your channels. That means you have cleaned your ego, so that your ego is now a channel for your soul, because your ego is so many the mind has so much chatter. Yoga compares the mind to a chattering monkey. There are so many there are so many things happening in your body, your desires. You cannot make your body quiet. You cannot make your mind quiet. So many interferences in before you can connect to your soul. There are so many interferences. No, suddenly you like to buy ice cream. Suddenly you like to eat this. Suddenly you like to go shopping. Suddenly, and you have to quiet your mind. You have to train your mind to be quiet, and that happens only when you continue to concentrate. No, and concentrate. It will be a long time. You will find that. You might find that you will be waking up one day with so full of ideas. You cannot predict when it will come, but when it comes, it's the beginning of your creative career. It can be done by anybody, no exception. I give the example of Van Gogh. Van Gogh was not a good painter in the beginning. He only became a good painter because for 10 years he persisted in painting. For 10 years. After 10 years, he was a master already. 10-year period, 10-year period, according to many scientists, psychologists, is what you need to become a genius in anything. 10 year of effort, determined effort, a burning desire to do it. 10 years is enough.
So, Prof, this is a refreshing thought, no? Because we're still on the culture of healing. For those who just found us, no? And this is the second category.
Category. But the third, actually there's a subcategory in the creative aesthetic, saying that the second category is creative aesthetic. And well, I've talked about creativity, that it connects you to your soul, so you become much bigger. You will connect to the whole of the iceberg. You connect to the whole iceberg. But the category, I think that the aesthetic aspect of creativity is very, very important, because math is to science, as aesthetics is to art. You prove your theorems, you prove your hypothesis in science through the use of mathematics. Now, in art, you prove the soundness, you prove the validity of your art through aesthetics. So, aesthetics is not about art.
Aesthetic is not about
It's
art.
not about art. Yes.
Talaga, Prof?
Oh, it's not about art.
Hindi ako yun nung tinuro mo yun. Ngayon ko na narinig yan, ah.
No. Separate art from aesthetics. Although, as I said, art is a no, art uses aesthetics as a tool. So aesthetics is a tool of art in the same way that mathematics is a tool of science. In order to prove theories, validate hypotheses in science, you have to use math. Now in art, in order to validate your work, you have to use aesthetics. Aesthetics is a science of perception. Aesthetics is the science of perception.
So when does aesthetics become art, sir?
No. Aesthetics is not art at all.
It's not art at all.
It's not art at all. It is a tool. It's a kind of logic.
Parang packaging lang siya. Prof.
It's a kind of logic that art uses. Parang packaging. Yeah, it's a form. It's a form that art uses. It's a container of art. Look, ganito.
Absent ako niyan, Prof, nung tinuro mo yan.
Baka nga. Aesthetics is not art at all. But let's liken it to a flashlight. No? Aesthetics is a tool for seeing. It's a tool of perception. You will not perceive anything. Actually, even for normal seeing, you will not see anything without aesthetics. You can liken aesthetics to a flashlight. When you're examining something in pitch darkness, as they said, so dark, you cannot see anything. Well, you cannot see anything if it's so dark. And you usually is what that flashlight focuses on is art. That it becomes art because the light focuses on it. But when the light does not flash on it, no, it is nothing. It is nothing. You have to flash that light on the ground to see something. And when you see that, when you see that something, that is art. And it's the flashlight that makes it possible. That's the meaning of aesthetics.
Oh, yung pala. And for those who are listening to
Aesthetics is a
concept,
tool of perception.
Prof, paano
One
natin
of the most important tools of perception. Okay, I'll give you. My internet is unstable. I didn't hear your question.
for those who are listening to
Can you
this
please repeat it?
concept for the first time, Prof, that aesthetic
Yes.
is a tool for seeing, and in itself is not art. So what is
Yes.
art?
Art is a kind of expression of an idea. It's a it's an expression of an idea, feeling, or sensation. And in order for this expression to be visible, in order for the expression to be visible, you have to use aesthetics. Otherwise, you won't be able to see it. Art is the objectification or translation into visible form. Translate into visible form an idea, a feeling, or a sensation. Not only visible, you translate it into oral, audible form or whatever form. Let's say you translate it into uh, moving form, as in dance, no? You translate it to any kind of, to generalize, you translate an idea, feeling, or sensation, or an experience into tangible form, whether the tangible form is music, or literature, or visual arts, or dance, or cinema. That's the meaning of art. But you cannot do that without aesthetics. You have to use aesthetics to make visible the invisible, to make tangible the intangible. As I said, using the analogy of the flashlight, you cannot see the ground without that flashlight. Very simple. It's very easy text to explain. Actually, it's not difficult to explain the meaning of aesthetics
So,
because
Prof,
look,
in relation to the topic today, no, the Filipino culture of healing. How would you summarize this to these first two categories? Because it is the first 50% of today's discussion. And then we will give the floor to two young people who I invited to join us para magtanong din. Kasi these concepts that they're hearing for the first time, there's something that I've been privileged to listen to in my doctoral program at the
yes,
Asian Institute of Management. Sorry,
uh,
Asian Social Institute,
yes,
where Prof. De Leon is teaching several PhD subjects. Yeah. So in summary, Prof, social category, and then yung this aesthetic category, aesthetic creative category,
uh, that to summarize,
culture
I,
of
I was saying earlier that Philippine culture has so many practices, skills, especially intelligences for healing. Because skills or culture is about skills. Culture is some kind of a three-layered cake, uh, beginning with perception or pananaw or our worldview, and then it gives rise to values, and the values give rise to skills. That's why the culture is to cultivate, and what do we cultivate? Skills. And Filipino culture is very rich in skills for healing. We have so many of that. And one of the most important, of course, is the human connectivity aspect. Because the more you connect to people, the healthier you are. Why? Essentially, when you connect to people, connect to your soul, connect to nature, connect to the world, you no longer become a separate entity, which is called the ego. The ego is a very insecure self, the small self. And most people confine their being to the ego and they don't feel connected to other people. And as I said, connecting to other people doesn't simply mean the quantity of people, that quantity of friends that you have, but a close relationship, um, a trusting relationship. So you have to really be connected to transcend the limitations of your ego, and anything that connects you to a larger world, anything that enables you to transcend your limited ego, is health promoting. And the second one category that where you can connect your ego to something larger is the creative, because when you become creative, you connect to your soul, which is much larger than your physical body. Your physical body is more or less the basis of the separate ego, because most people think of their physical body as the seat of itself, and their brain as the seat of itself, which is really wrong. Yourself is not in your brain; it's much larger than the brain. And the moment you confine yourself to the physical body, especially to the brain, you suffer from an insecure ego. But in being creative, you connect to your soul, which is much larger than your ego. This is
That's
how
a,
I will summarize the
a
two.
strong concept,
But
no?
although I have not really given an example for the aesthetic and how the aesthetic can expand your being. So anyway, I just confine myself to the social and the creative, not yet the aesthetic.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Bago tayo pumunta dun sa next two, sa second half na categories, I would like to give the floor to our young audience members, and I would like to introduce them first. So, Andrew and Godwin, they've been attending the talk shop sessions, and I invited them because I would like them to hear from you, Prof.
Yes,
So, beginning with Andrew.
So generally, I only have like one question to ask, like really. So, what do you think about like other cultures influencing our own like Filipino culture? Like for example, like the current Philippines right now, especially after like World War II, when like America like brought over their influence to like the Filipinos during that time. What do you think is like I don't know how to really like explain this, but like what do you think or how do you think that impacted like our Filipino culture when they influenced us that time?
I, I think that's very good because the more influences, the better. Uh, you know what being Filipino has nothing to do with influences. What is important is what we do with those influences, because in fact some of my historian friends still talk about influences, but influences are nothing. No, it's what we do to the influences that really matters. And if many Filipinos think that being Filipino has to be of the 16th century, even before the Spaniards came, and we were Southeast Asians. Some Filipinos think that being of that period is being pure Filipino. The indigenous peoples, some Filipinos think that the indigenous peoples are more pure Filipino than us. No. In fact, the more you go back in history, the more you will not find Filipinos at all. What you will find are Southeast Asians, because our 16th century culture is very Southeast Asian. So we are hardly different. We were hardly different from the culture of Indonesia, Malaysia, or even Cambodia and other Southeast Asian countries at the time. We had the same basic culture. We were all Southeast Asians. As I said, our languages came from Taiwan. So that's not Filipino yet. Although we can say that what is now Philippines enclosed many areas where we have those indigenous peoples. So we were Southeast Asians, and whatever made us Filipinos were the slight differences that we have from the Indonesian Southeast Asians. In other words, we were Filipinos by virtue of a slight little differences that we had with Southeast Asians in Indonesia or Malaysia. But these differences were slight, very little. However, the moment the Spaniards came, we became more Filipino. Why? Because we became distinct from Indonesia. Indonesia had Dutch influence. ours was Spanish influence. And we became more Filipino because we became more distinct. Being Filipino means becoming more distinct, becoming different from others. And what we did to Spanish influence, we Filipinized almost all of them. There was hardly any Spanish influence that we did not Filipinize. Look at what we did to the Virgin Mary. We readily we were able to accept Virgin Mary and the Christ child so readily because they were very important. The relationship between mother and child has always been sacred in Philippine culture. So we were able to accept, to really make ours, the Madonna and child, no? Virgin Mary and the Christ child, because they became another symbol of our mother and child relationship. And that means we Filipinize Christianity very readily. You know that the popes, almost all of the popes, and until now we are known as the country, el pueblo que amante de Maria, the country who is in love with Mary. We are known in the whole world as a country in love with Mary. There's no other country in the world. In fact, according to the parish priest of Baclaran right now, if we are going to send a religious mission anywhere in the world, it should be the mission of Mary, converting people to love Mary. That's what we are. Look, we Filipinized Christianity and we made it our own. So we became enriched because aside from our Katutubo, indigenous cultures, we now have another subculture, which is the culture of devotion to the patron saint, culture of devotion to Christ, culture of devotion to Mary, culture of devotion to the Black Nazarene, culture of devotion to Nuestra Señora de Penafrancia or other patrons. Now that we have Filipinized, we became enriched because of this. Now the Americans came, and look, there have been so many influences coming from the U.S. If you make a catalog of many things that came from the U.S., they are no longer American. They have become Filipinized. Especially we colonized English. Look, basketball. What did we do to basketball? We enclose it in Tagalog, magka-basketball tayo, mag-taxi. You don't use those nouns as verbs in English. Taxi and basketball are nouns in English. You cannot use them as verbs, but we can easily use verbs, anything that comes from abroad. That's why if you look at our culture, we have Filipinized English, we have Filipinized American culture so much. So we became enriched again. And we were creating subcultures in the sense that we have the Maranao subculture, we have the Chinoy subculture in the Philippines. Many Chinoys in the Philippines don't think of themselves as Chinese. They think of themselves as one ethnic group of the Philippines. That means we became, every time there's an influence that comes to our shores, we always Filipinize them. So we become enriched. We now have so many subcultures. We have at least 8 subcultures to be proud. We have now 8 subcultures to be proud of. We became richer and richer, we became more distinct as Filipinos because which other Southeast Asian country has an American influence so strongly, Spanish influence so strongly? We are the only country in the world. We are the only Southeast Asian country in the world with that. So we became more distinct. We became more Filipino. We become more Filipinos with every influence that comes to us because we always change that influence to make it ours. We Filipinize them. It's like Sheila learning new languages, and every time she learns a new language, she has a new thinking, but it's still Sheila and not another person. It's still her mind that she will express to that language. She will not be expressing French mind through that. Even if she learns French language, she'll be expressing her own mind through French language. In spite of the French influence, she'll be using French to speak her own mind rather than French mind. That's how she becomes enriched by learning another language. Or that's how we become enriched by learning another culture.
This is so refreshing, Prof, that even just this discussion on how we should embrace our evolving culture.
Well, it's a world one culture. No culture is static. We become richer and richer with every influence.
Yeah.
We now have the Kundiman, for example. We didn't have the Kundiman before, but the Kundiman is an Italian influence. But our Kundiman is so different from Italian music that you cannot mistake our Kundiman for Italian. That means we have a new kind of music without being submerged under Italian music.
I think this intelligent question from Andrew has open
Very
doors,
good question. Yes.
especially when you mentioned the 8 subcultures.
Yes.
That can be, that's a topic in itself that we can schedule on
There's,
another episode.
there is a TV series going on now in ANC channel, although I don't have an ANC channel here, but the NCCA did a series of Buhay na Buhay from 1 to 8. Buhay na Buhay refers to all of the 8 subcultures we have and how they're still, all of these 8 subcultures are very much alive. The culture of the indigenous peoples, the culture of the Muslim Filipinos, the culture of the lowland Christians, yung devotion to the patron saint, the culture of the family, the culture of the academe, the pop culture of the young people, and culture of the activists, and culture of nationhood. These are the 8 subcultures.
Thanks,
You can
Prof.
watch them. There is a series on this.
Sige, Prof. We can discuss that and
We can
schedule.
talk about that later.
Yes. Andrew, did the professor's response answer your question?
Yes, it actually did. It's like it makes so much sense. Because usually those like big countries, for example, like America or like that, wherever they go, they influence that country to become like them. But from your perspective, it's more like we adopted their like culture also to make it our own.
We,
Sort of
we
like,
were enriched. We
like
were enriched actually.
yeah.
We didn't become Americans. Look, as
We
I
got
said,
more like yeah, we like learned from it. It's like I was like, oh yeah, actually that
I,
makes
I,
sense. Makes sense.
I was citing Plus Elorde, Efren Bata Reyes, and even Manny Pacquiao. Whenever they win, they don't claim that they are the best. They say, I'm just lucky. Which is very Filipino, in spite of American influence on them. Billiards is American, and boxing is really where we imported it from the US, but they didn't become American. They retain their own culture because we changed the culture. We changed American influences to make them our own. Our culture is very strong, actually, very, very strong. And I can cite many data documents to show that.
Another question, Prof. This time from Godwin.
Yes.
Yeah, let me invite Godwin. There he is.
I just also have one question. Can you give like us in general like some ways to enhance our creativity and try to like help our minds to be more creative, because you said you have learned much from creativity, so can you help us with tips and stuff that we can like implement?
Okay, thank you. Gilbert Hyatt has one recipe for this. Constant challenge. Really challenge yourself to do big things. In other words, don't shirk from big tasks. Let's say you like to write a novel, do it. You like to compose music, do it right now. Constant challenge yourself. In other words, if you have achieved something at this time, the next step should be something bigger. And according to him, contact with eminent minds. Contact with eminent minds. Read about the lives of the masters. Try to, well, befriend or maybe have some kind of living contact with a writer. Attend their lectures. No, I was lucky to have Guillermo Tolentino as one of my teachers. Guillermo Tolentino is the sculptor of the Oblation in UP and the sculptor of the Balintawak Monument. He was a very good teacher when it came to literature and language. Also, Jose Maceda was my teacher in music, and Binal Sanso, and I was influenced also by Jose Hoya. I enrolled in his classes. Now, be in contact with these minds, no? The more you become one with them, you will learn their secrets. They say that just do it. You don't have to really worry about. Don't and in the beginning, don't compare yourself with the masters. Never do that, because you do not put the cart before the horse. Many people, before they begin to write, study criticism. Uh, those who are taking up literature, they study the works of the great masters from first year to fourth year. And so their critical mind becomes very, very developed. even before they start doing anything creative. So don't let your critical mind be the master, be the dictator. Uh, don't think about criticism. Don't criticize your work. Don't compare your work to any of the great masters' work. Just write and write, and later you'll find that your work will become better and better until you will now have the confidence to compare yourself to the great masters. But in the beginning, don't ever criticize your work, saying, "Oh, this is a poor work compared to the work of Rizal or compared to the work of Dostoevsky and so on." These great writers did not start training in college before they began to write. They started writing. Even Rizal started writing at a very young age before he entered college. Don't get training first. Don't get some kind of training before you write, unless you just attend workshops. But this is another advice: attend guilds workshops, your creative writing workshops or painting workshops, because in workshops, in guilds, no, in guilds, you are not taught criticism. You are taught how to do it. You are taught how to do it in workshops. Never mind the theory. Forget theories. That will only destroy your career. Just start working on it. So it's better to attend workshops or guilds. Become a member of a guild for something, no, rather than attending school. Because 99% of geniuses did not come from the academy. I can assure you of that. 99% of geniuses did not come from schools. They started working on their own. They came from guilds, apprenticing themselves with masters. Leonardo da Vinci was an apprentice of Pollaiolo. Perugino was an apprentice of Raphael was an apprentice of Perugino, and so on. Apprentice yourself to somebody if you have very good friends or creative.
It's really this is really insightful, Prof. Napakagandang message yan for the young people. That the creative genius is there, and do not close the doors. Do not constrict yourself.
Make the canal clean. Make the canal clean so that pure water will already flow through it, rather than the dirt.
That's a relevant question from Godwin.
Relevant.
Yeah, we have a very short time remaining, Prof. But I don't want to skip the last two categories. So maybe next Wednesday we can expound on them. But
yes, of course.
in the next 10 minutes, could you enlighten us on the mythical and then the mystical categories of our culture of healing?
Although I have not talked about the aesthetic yet. The aesthetic, I'm looking at the logo of Andrew, the one with the caduceus or and the wings. The black part of your logo is the figure. That figure will not be visible. You will not see that figure if the background is also black. You can only see that figure because your background is white. So that is a figure-ground relationship, and that is aesthetics. You cannot see the figure unless the ground is very unlike the figure, unless the ground is very clear. That's why when you hang a painting, you put it inside the frame, and the frame is the figure compared to the wall. That's why the frame is very visible, because the wall is blank, is the ground. Well, I just explained very, very briefly one aspect of the aesthetic. Although the aesthetic, I can talk about it more next time, especially when it comes to rhythm, because I was saying that Hiyang is Filipino, and the most important aesthetic principle used by Hiyang is rhythm. Rhythm. Yes, rhythm. Now, when it comes to the mythical has to do with identifying with your archetypes. I think Sheila knows very much the archetypes, because she also teaches that in your courses. When you identify with your archetype, you become bigger because an archetype is a composite of a skill or an ability uh, that has been practiced by humanity from the very beginning. For example, take the archetype of the mother. All the experiences of motherhood are in the archetype. All the experiences of motherhood from the very beginning of time until now are deposited or or embedded in that archetype. So when you identify with the mother archetype, you become a great mother because you experience the motherhood of all the mothers throughout history. That's the meaning of an archetype. Imagine you become the great mother, you become the great father. When you identify with the archetype of the artist, you become the great artist. So find your archetype and you become much bigger. And by being much bigger, you are able to escape from your limited self, limited ego, which is so insecure. So you will suffer much less stress. You will not be stressed. You'll be much more inspired as we are not in this world. And also, uh, what I emphasize in this mythical is the way you transcend time. The moment you can transcend the clock time or linear time, you will feel much bigger because you are no longer bound by minutes, by seconds, by hours, but you will have a sense of timelessness. So you're being expunged so much. And it's the meaning of transcendence, this meaning of healing. Healing is getting away from your ego, the lower self. And then lastly, mystical. This is much bigger than identifying with the archetype because the archetype is still in the human level. An archetype is in the unconscious level, where you find the human soul. The human soul is in the unconscious level called collective unconscious by Carl Jung. This is where you find the soul, and the soul is a ray of God. But in the mystical, you you meditate, you pray, you do many things so that you become one with the very spirit of God. You identify with the very core, with the very center of what you call the creative living principle. And that's the biggest kind of identity of all. That's the biggest expansion. That's the most expanded being that you can ever experience, identifying with an infinite. That's why many people, when they identify with Christ, when they identify with the Buddha, they seem to lose all their worries. They seem to lose all their sense of danger. They feel so safe because they're being so secure. They find peace with themselves. Not the largest kind of identification. That's the biggest kind of identity. Identifying with the very spirit of God. That's the last. And of course, Filipino culture has a very important contribution to that, the concept of kapwa, which I can explain later.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, this is such a rich lecture discussion, Prof. Final word for those who are struggling when it comes to healing themselves, especially as you talk about the mythical and mystical aspects of our culture, which I feel is something that we have full control of.
yes,
What are the suggestions, recommendations that you can have for those who are watching us and who are waiting for words of wisdom?
as I say, from the social, you try to develop very close friendships, and a friendship that has a very deep quality. The quality must be not only superficial, no, kind of unconditional connection with somebody. That's for the social level. For the aesthetic, try to, for the creative aesthetic, try to practice any kind of creativity, not necessarily art. Can be an inventor of a software, try to design a software, try to do gardening, anything creative, anything where you can anything where you can express yourself. That's the meaning of creativity, so that you can express yourself.
Anything that
And
you're drawn to, Prof.
this one,
Anything that a person is drawn to, whatever
yes,
profession.
yes, yes. whatever your interest is, you just express yourself through it because that's where you can exercise your creativity. And also, when it comes to the aesthetic aspect, try to watch as, as much as you can beautiful things. Try to look for beauty everywhere. That's aesthetic. Aesthetics is about beauty, not necessarily about art. Because the beautiful is not just in art. Nature is beautiful. God's creations are beautiful. Nature in the deepest, in the galactic level, in the micro level. These are all examples of beauty, but they are not necessarily art. In other words, aesthetics is broader than art. So try to find beauty everywhere. When it comes to the mythical, uh, try to study, well, Jungian psychology, or Sheila has a lot of exercises on how you may find your archetypes. I think that's your area there, no? And also, when it comes to the mythical, do anything timeless. Do anything that will make you forget time, like walking, no, strolling, walking in the park, or cooking, or something, weaving, anything that makes you forget the passage of time. And lastly, when it comes to the mystical, I think we have to express gratitude every day, gratitude to the Creator for everything that, for the blessing that are enjoying every day. That's one of the best ways to connect with the Creator, to the expression of gratitude. I think that's what we can do every day. Thank
Wow.
you.
Thank you very much, Prof. It's an honor. It's been a pleasure listening to you again. I honestly never get tired listening to your
Well,
lectures and attending your discussions. You're a mentor, a friend, um, a role model, and I'm very fortunate to have you on this platform. And I would like to thank Andrew and Godwin, my outstanding students in communication, for attending and for raising those relevant and intelligent questions. So every Wednesday we have Wellness Wednesdays episode, and we're featuring you, Prof. I hope you'll be
okay.
available again
Yes,
next
I will.
Wednesday
Thank
um,
you.
to discuss this further, and also other relevant topics,
Okay.
especially those concepts that will allow us to breeze through these new experiences that we have in the new normal and
Thank you.
embrace all the potential opportunities that
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express these ideas to people who really are interested. Very intriguing questions.
yes. Thank you, Prof. So, ang link po natin will be the same, TalkShop PE.
Okay.
So that's TalkShop
Okay.
Facebook. Thank you,
Okay.
Prof.
See you
Salamat
next
na
week.
marami.
See you next week.
Yes,
Bye
see you
bye.
next.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Godwin, Andrew. Thanks, everyone, for watching.